Late October is shoulder season where I work. Days shrink fast, cold arrives early, and everything feels like it's tilting toward winter. I was 35, steady job, steady habits, the kind of person who keeps receipts, time logs, and photo records because it saves arguments later. I'd been assigned a 2-day on-site verification run in a small town tucked near the Appalachian edge. Nothing dramatic, just document-heavy work. Checking utility meters and relay boxes, confirming addresses, collecting signatures, time-stamped photos, the usual. I drove in alone on back roads that wound through hardwoods gone copper and bare. The town looked maintained but tired, older storefronts, a lone diner, a shuttered mill, yards trimmed so neatly they felt watched rather than lived in. I trusted patterns, not ghost stories. Regional sent me because I'm reliable with compliance steps, safety rules, checklists, clean documentation. The assignment required access to several addresses plus a municipal building, each stop needing a signature and a photo that proved time and location. It was out of the way enough that I booked the only motel and planned to finish before dark, then leave at first light. I expected a quiet dinner, a boring night, and coffee that tasted like burnt optimism. The first oddness was logistical. My phone drifted in and out of signal. There was one gas pump that looked like it had survived 3 decades of storms and stubbornness. Everywhere had short business hours posted like commandments. And I started noticing redundancies that didn't fit a low-crime place. Multiple deadbolts on doors, metal grates folded back like they were used daily, porch lights already on in mid-afternoon. People moved with the focused efficiency of folks trying not to be outside at the wrong time. In the late afternoon, the town shifted in a way I can't explain cleanly. Cars thinned, then disappeared. Pedestrians became rare, then none. The diner still had an open sign glowing in the window, but the hostess stopped seating people and started wiping tables that were already clean. I told myself it was small-town habit, early sleepers, hunting season, maybe a high school game somewhere I couldn't see. Then a single sound cut through the air. Not a full siren, not an alarm, more like a church bell or an industrial marker, one brief blast that felt scheduled. Right after it, the last few people outside didn't run, but they moved faster, heads down, steps efficient. Curtains shut. A hardware store employee pulled the door closed and flipped the sign with a speed that looked practiced. I felt a mild, rational unease, the sensation of arriving late to a rule everyone else already knew. At the motel, the front office was closing early. The clerk slid my key card across the counter like it was a timed drill and checked my ID without looking up for long. Room's on the end. Be inside before sunset, she said, voice flat. It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either. More like a nurse repeating a routine that keeps people alive. I asked why. She didn't answer the question. Just before sunset. I carried my bag down the walkway. Everything smelled like cold leaves and old asphalt. I stepped back out to the car to grab my equipment case as the sun dropped behind the ridge, and the temperature fell hard in minutes. The quiet thickened. No dogs. No radios. No distant traffic. Even the insect noise that usually hangs in the air was gone, like someone had muted the world. That's when I noticed the defenses up close. Door frames reinforced with metal plates, fresh scrape marks low on a few doors, and a pale residue along thresholds, as if something had been applied, swept away, applied again. The motel's Wi-Fi was down. My phone went to no service and stayed there. I tried the car radio and got mostly static, with faint bleed-through that never resolved into a station. I kept picking normal explanations, poor infrastructure, weather, old buildings, while my body made its own decisions. Listen harder, check the lock twice, watch the last strip of daylight as if it mattered more than it should. Sunset didn't just darken the sky. It triggered the town. That's the only way I can say it now. This wasn't closing early. It was a synchronized lock-in, timed to the sun, not the clock. I saw houses with interior lights on, but no silhouettes near the windows, like everyone was staying back from the glass. A child's bicycle lay on its side in a yard as if it had been dropped mid-ride. Nearby, a chain was dragged across a side gate, fresh marks in the dirt, too deliberate to be wind. I stood there weighing the sensible options like a grown man does when he's trying not to be dramatic. Dark roads, low fuel, unfamiliar turns, no signal. Leaving immediately felt risky in a practical way. Staying felt risky in a quiet, instinctive way. I decided to secure the room and leave at first light, controlled, careful, while a separate part of me insisted that something outside preferred people exposed. Full dark came quick. I killed the room lights and left only the bathroom glow for a minute while I staged what I'd need. Keys, shoes, flashlight, wallet, then turned even that off. I wasn't trying to play survivor. I was trying not to become a silhouette. The sound started softly. Not a knock. Not footsteps. A slow pressure against the building, lean release, moving along the exterior wall as if whatever made it was testing the structure rather than approaching me. The walkway light outside looked dimmer than it should have, and the shadows pooled in places light normally spills. The darkness didn't behave like normal darkness. I checked the peephole once, carefully, and saw nothing but the empty walkway and the suggestion of the parking lot beyond. When I looked away, my car alarm chirped a single time, just one short, confused sound, and then stopped. The motel's exterior security light flickered twice and went dead, leaving the lot in a dull wash from distant street lamps. Then I heard scuffing at the bottom of my door. Not scratching like an animal, not tapping like a person, more like something sliding along the seam where wood meets threshold, searching for a catch, feeling for a weakness. I pushed a chair under the knob, then dragged the dresser a few inches closer, not because I thought it would stop anything forever, but because it would by seconds. Seconds matter. The door hardware shifted. Subtle, but real, pressure from the outside that flexed the latch just enough to make the metal speak. My throat went dry. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I'd failed some invisible inspection. The contact texture was the worst part. It wasn't knuckles. It wasn't a tool. It was a dragging, gliding touch that seemed to dislike friction, as if it wanted entry without noise and couldn't quite manage it. The scuffing paused, then started again lower, slower, like listening. A few seconds later, it relocated to the window wall. I didn't see a face. I didn't even see a shape I could swear to under oath. What I sensed was density, darkness that looked thicker than the rest, close enough that the glass felt vulnerable. The room felt smaller, like air had been taken out of it. I stayed still, breathing shallow, resisting the urge to check again. The testing continued, then stopped completely, like whatever it was had decided whether I'd noticed it. The pressure didn't end with a clean finish. It faded by degrees, less at the door, then nothing at the window, then only the ordinary creak of an old building settling. I didn't sleep. I ran a watch routine like I'd done during storm outages on other trips. Short checks, long stillness, conserve battery and attention. Every time I moved, I waited afterward, listening for an answer. At some point a faint smell seeped in near the door, earthy and cold, like turned soil that had never seen sunlight. It came in a thin line, then dissipated, as if the air itself exhaled and then held its breath again. Near dawn, normal noises returned in small increments. One engine started far away. A dog barked once, then went quiet. Something rolled, maybe a garbage bin. Relief hit my body before my mind could argue with it. When daylight was stable, I packed fast, kept my eyes on the tree line and the spaces between buildings, and left without ceremony. In the parking lot, I saw a fresh mark low on my door. Contact damage, not vandalism. Too placed, too deliberate, and not consistent with an animal rub. By mid-morning the town behaved as if nothing had happened. Businesses reopened. People reappeared. The synchronized urgency was gone, replaced by routine politeness that never drifted anywhere near last night. I finished the minimum required stops in daylight and left the region the same day, skipping anything that would have kept me past late afternoon. Later, reviewing my documentation, I found small inconsistencies that made my skin tighten. Timestamps with minutes missing or duplicated around sunset, like my devices struggled to keep stable time without signal. A handful of photos taken near dusk had a recurring artifact, a blurred dark band on the edge of the frame, always from the same direction, like something close to the lens that I hadn't seen in real time. When I tried to map the route afterward, there were odd gaps, roads that didn't align cleanly with standard navigation, the motel address not matching public listings in a way that made it annoyingly hard to verify. And that threshold residue stayed in my mind. It looked maintained, not neglected, a boundary renewed because it worked. I never went back. I told my supervisor the site conditions weren't reliable and pushed for reassignment on anything in that area. I didn't make it a story, I made it a safety note. Even now, my habits shift in fall and winter. I lock doors earlier without meaning to. I avoid being on unfamiliar roads near sunset, like it's an old rule my body learned before my brain agreed. I can explain parts of it with people, organized trespassers, a local ritual, a community enforcing isolation for reasons they don't share. But the testing at the door didn't feel human in motive or rhythm. What stays with me is the town's competence. Everyone knew the rule, everyone complied, and no one warned the outsider. Some places don't lock up to keep criminals out. They lock up because, after the sun is gone, the outside belongs to something else. Early winter always makes the days feel shorter than they are. That week it was midweek, nothing dramatic, nothing special, just another job that needed a pair of hands and a signature. I was in my mid-30s and had settled into the kind of routine where you trust systems more than luck. Confirm the address, print the work order, keep receipts, take photos, log mileage. I ran a dash cam because it had saved me once in a fender bender, and because I like clean timelines. I also like arriving before dark. Not because I'm afraid of the dark, but because daylight keeps everything honest. The weather was ordinary but turning, low clouds, light drizzle that never committed to real rain, and that dull gray that flattens the world. The forecast called it light precipitation. It felt like the sky was sweating. My GPS was fine, cheerful even, recalculating around traffic like it always did. It was a normal drive for a normal reason, and I treated it like one. The job was straightforward. Pick up a piece of equipment from a client's site, inspect it, document the condition, and bring it back. No heroics, no late-night call-out, just a midweek pickup that would keep tomorrow's schedule clean. About 40 minutes into the drive, the highway dropped to a crawl. Up ahead, orange cones tightened the lanes and a clean Dieter sign appeared. White board, black letters, the kind of official-looking thing you don't question. Bridge work detour. An arrow pointed to an exit I hadn't planned on taking. The sign looked new. The arrow was crisp. There were no hand-painted boards, no confusion. The Dieter seemed logical. A short loop through county roads and back onto the highway a few miles ahead. I took it without thinking, the way you follow a marked path in an unfamiliar building. The off-ramp led to a county road that narrowed fast. Trees pressed closer. Houses thinned out, and then I saw another Dieter sign. Same size, same font, same arrow. Then another. Too frequent. Like someone wanted to make absolutely sure I kept going the way they wanted. I passed a barn with a slanted metal roof, rusted red, a pale rectangle of old paint on the side where a logo had been. 10 minutes later, without noticing how it happened, I passed it again. The road opened into a tiny town that looked maintained but empty, like a set that had been dressed for a scene no one showed up to film. Storefronts had lights on. Porch lamps glowed behind lace curtains. A traffic light cycled through green and yellow, and red for no one at all. I pulled into a gas station because the habit is hardwired in me. Half a tank becomes a problem if you keep getting rerouted. The station sign said open, and the fluorescent canopy lights were on, but the pumps were dark. A handwritten notice, white paper taped inside the glass, said something like "Pay inside," the letters thick and impatient. The door was locked. I tried it twice just to confirm. The handle didn't give. No bell, no movement inside. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and that sweet, stale gasoline odor that clings to old stations. I stood there with drizzle tapping my jacket, listening for any sign of a person. Nothing. Back in the car, I told myself what any adult tells himself to stay calm. Staffing issues, winter hours, someone stepped out. I checked my phone. No signal. I checked the GPS. The map was there, but the town's street name flickered between labels like it couldn't decide what it was called. My dashcam time display blinked once, just a single stutter, then continued as if nothing had happened. It was the kind of small glitch you normally forget. But I didn't forget it. I tried to leave the way I'd come in. The road out felt familiar until it didn't. 10 minutes later, I was back at the same traffic light, watching it change colors for an empty intersection. I told myself I'd missed a turn, so I did what I always do. I tested it. I reset my trip odometer to 0. I photographed a distinctive mailbox, black, dented, with a hand-painted number that looked like it had been repainted once too often. I drove out again, taking the next exit road instead of the first. My mileage ticked up in a steady, honest way. I passed the same uniform fence line, the same dark tree line, and I should have hit open countryside. Instead, I rolled back into town on a different street, facing the same gas station canopy from a different angle. I tried a third route. Same result. The exits didn't lead out. They looped back, like the town was ringed by invisible one-way gates. That's when the Dieter signs started appearing where they shouldn't. One was posted at the mouth of a private driveway, pointing back toward town. Another leaned behind a building, half hidden, as if it had been planted for someone who already knew to look there. One sat at a corner facing the wrong direction, as if it was meant to catch the eye of a driver coming from a road that didn't exist. The edges of the town didn't feel natural. The tree lines were too uniform, like they'd been trimmed into boundaries. The fences ran too continuously, without the usual breaks and inconsistencies you see in rural places. Even the road shoulders looked abruptly clean, like they were maintained not for beauty, but to keep something clear. The sky darkened faster than it should have. The drizzle thickened into a fine, cold mist that reduced the world to a limited radius around my headlights. The radio wouldn't pull in anything steady, just a short weather bulletin that repeated every few minutes with the same phrasing, the same cadence, like a looped recording. No cell service, no passing cars, no pedestrians. The town's lights stayed on, but it felt less like hospitality and more like containment. There's a moment when your brain stops offering comforting explanations and starts assembling a different kind of picture. I remember gripping the steering wheel and feeling the faint tackiness of dried hand sanitizer on the leather, thinking, this isn't me making a wrong turn. This is a system. Whether it was people or something else, it was designed. The detour wasn't guiding me around a bridge. It was guiding me into a place that didn't want me leaving. Panic is expensive. It burns fuel, burns battery, burns judgment. So I made an adult decision. The kind you make in emergencies when you can't fix the problem, only manage it. Stop driving in circles. Conserve. Choose one location with visibility and space. Record everything. I picked the town hall lot because it was open, flat, and lit by two tall sodium lamps that cast that harsh yellow light. I parked with my nose out, so I could pull forward fast. I turned off the cabin light. I kept the keys in my hand instead of the ignition. I angled my phone to record through the windshield, not because I expected anything, but because evidence is a kind of anchor. Then I waited, listening to the engine tick as it cooled, and to the soft hiss of mist on the hood. At first, nothing happened. The empty lot stayed empty. The town hall building sat there with dark windows like blank eyes. A flag hung limp from the pole, heavy with moisture. Then a vehicle eased into the lot behind me. No headlights, no interior light, just the shape of it, a darker rectangle moving through the yellow wash from the lamps. It stopped at a fixed distance, close enough to be present, far enough to pretend it wasn't following me. I didn't move right away. I watched my mirrors. The rear view showed the suggestion of a grille, but no readable plate. The dashcam was running, but the scene behind me on its tiny screen looked oddly smeared, as if the camera couldn't decide where to focus. After a minute, I started my engine. The other vehicle started too, perfect timing, like it was reacting to my sound. I pulled out slowly and turned right. It followed. I made a left at the next intersection. It made the same left. No aggressive acceleration, no honking, no lights. Just matching. To confirm, I did a controlled loop. 2 rights, a straight, then another right that should have brought me back to the same street from a different angle. The follower mirrored it exactly, keeping the same distance like it was tied to me with an invisible rope. I decided to head toward what I assumed was the center, where the buildings were closer and the lighting, theoretically, better. As I drove, something happened with the streetlights ahead of me. They didn't all go out at once. They blinked out sequentially, one, then the next, then the next, like someone was turning them off in a line to form a corridor of darkness leading away from the brighter part of town. The lights behind me stayed on. The lights to either side held. Only the ones ahead, in my path, dimmed and died in order. I slowed, not wanting to commit to that dark stretch. The follower slowed too. I pulled into a small lot beside what looked like a closed diner. Neon sign dark, windows reflecting only my own headlights. I kept the car in drive. My foot hovered over the brake. My hands were steady, but my pulse wasn't. That's when I heard the sound outside. It was soft and repeating, metal on pavement, then a pause, then metal again. Like someone dragging the base of a signpost. Or a heavy chain being pulled a short distance, set down, pulled again. There were no matching footsteps. No crunch of gravel, no rhythm of a person walking. Just that dragging sound, patient and methodical, somewhere near the rear quarter of my car. I leaned forward and cracked the door open maybe an inch. Enough to hear better, enough to see a sliver of the lot's edge. Cold air pushed in, damp and sharp. The follower vehicle surged. Not with a scream of tires, still quiet, still controlled, but it closed the distance fast enough that my body reacted before my mind finished analyzing. I slammed the door shut and locked it again, even though it was already locked. My heart hit hard against my ribs like it was trying to get out first. The other vehicle stopped again at that same fixed distance, as if it had only wanted to punish the idea of me stepping outside. The dragging sound continued for a few seconds more, then stopped abruptly, like someone had set something down and stepped away. I sat there, breathing shallow, watching my mirrors for movement that never fully resolved into a person. I stayed in the car until the sky began to change. Not sunrise yet, just that thinning of black into deep blue that tells you time is passing whether you like it or not. I conserved battery. No phone screen unless I needed it, no cabin heat unless the windows started fogging too much. I kept the engine off most of the time, starting it only in short bursts. The follower vehicle remained somewhere nearby for hours. Sometimes I could see its outline at the edge of the lot. Sometimes it was gone, and then, without me hearing it arrive, it would be there again, parked in a position that felt deliberately chosen to stay in my blind spots. I tried to document it. I zoomed in on my phone. I checked the dashcam footage. Every time I thought I had a clear angle on the plate, it turned into a smear of light and shadow, like the camera refused to hold the details. When full daylight finally arrived, the town looked normal. Still empty, but less wrong. The street lights were on again. The drizzle had eased. The edges didn't look as sharp. One road out finally let out, but only in daylight. I took it without stopping, driving until I hit the highway from the opposite side of the closure. There were no detour signs, no cones, no bridge work, just open road and moving traffic, like the night had been a private misunderstanding the world wasn't interested in acknowledging. Later, at home, I did what I always do when something doesn't fit. I checked the record. The detour signs were there in my footage, but unreadable. Not just blurry in the normal way, blurred consistently, as if the lettering refused to be captured. The arrows showed up. The whiteboards showed up. The words didn't. My GPS history was worse. It showed loops that made no sense, paths doubling back on roads that weren't labeled, sections where the map simply left gaps like someone had erased the town's edges. Street names appeared and vanished between frames of the route log, and there was a timestamp problem. A receipt in my wallet, a coffee stop I'd made before the highway, put me at a time that didn't match how long I'd been gone. By my odometer and fuel use, I'd been driving for hours. By the receipt and the dashcam's uninterrupted file length, I'd been trapped longer than the night should have allowed. I called the state line for road closures the next day, more to hear a human voice confirm reality than anything else. They told me the bridge hadn't been closed that day. The project listed on the sign, when I searched for it later, had ended years ago. I still do the work. I still drive for routine jobs. But I don't take rural detours near dusk if I can help it. If a road closes late in the day, I'll wait it out in a lit parking lot with people around, or I'll backtrack 20 miles to a larger route. It's not fear in the simple sense. It's respect for a thing I don't understand. What happened to me wasn't a monster in the headlights. It was logistical, adult real, a place that could redirect you, delay you, and then release you, without ever explaining why, and without leaving marks you can prove. Months later, in a different county, I saw that detour sign style again. Same clean board, same arrow, same two-new look, posted at the edge of a fading two-lane road. I slowed without meaning to. When I glanced back in my mirror, it was gone. Late spring has a softness to it that can fool you into relaxing your guard. The air stays cool in the mornings, then warms up like someone turned a dial. I was 34, temporarily planted in a small town I'd only ever seen as a dot on a project spreadsheet. 3 months, maybe 4. A renovation contract. An old municipal building getting rewired and brought up to code. It was steady work, close enough to drive, far enough that renting a little place made more sense than commuting. I'd lived in the city long enough to trust distance the way other people trust locks. In the city, polite means brief. Here, polite meant you stopped, you chatted, you remembered names. There were hand-lettered flyers on corkboards, casserole sign-up sheets, and a church potluck calendar that looked more organized than my entire adult life. At first it felt safe in an old-fashioned way. Porch lights, trimmed hedges, neighbors waving like they'd been waiting all day to do it. Almost nostalgic. Almost. On my second week, I needed something embarrassingly mundane. A replacement mailbox key. The landlord had given me one key that bent if you looked at it wrong, and the post office box in the lobby was the old kind with a stiff little brass lock. The town office handled it, apparently because the post office didn't do keys anymore. That was my first lesson. In a place like that, Responsibility moved around like it had legs. The town office shared a building with the library, same front door, different counters, like a house split into two families. I filled out a form, showed my ID, and waited while a woman behind the desk tapped at a computer that looked older than my first apartment. While she worked, I wandered to a bulletin board near the entrance. It was crowded with the town's nervous system: announcements, lost pets, yard sales, volunteer schedules. One thing stood out because it was updated weekly, neatly bordered in blue marker. Volunteer list, community duties. Under it were names and dates, and halfway down, like it belonged there, was mine. Spelled correctly, first and last. I stared long enough that the woman called out, friendly as anything, "Oh, you saw it. Good. We like to give folks a little notice." I turned back. I didn't sign up for anything. She didn't look confused. She didn't even pause. "No worries. It's just your turn." In the city, when something weird happens, you assume it's a scam. In a small town, you assume it's tradition. I told myself it was a clerical mix-up. New renter, name got copied into the wrong place, someone would fix it. 2 days later, I was dragging a coil of cable out of my trunk when my next-door neighbor, older guy, clean yard, always in a cap, wandered over like he'd been meaning to. "Appreciate you helping out," he said, nodding toward my porch. "Saturday's coming quick." I blinked. "Sorry?" He smiled in a way that was still friendly, but had an edge of relief behind it, like he'd been holding his breath. "Your turn. 7:30. Won't be long. Just do it proper." "What exactly am I supposed to do?" He patted my shoulder, light as dust. "They'll give you what you need." That evening, when I got back, there was a flyer on my door. Plain paper, black ink, no logo, just instructions with the same date circled in thick marker. Community participation is community protection. Under that, a time, 7:30 p.m. The next morning I went back to the office. I kept my tone calm, like I was disputing a utility bill. "My name is on your volunteer list," I said. "It shouldn't be." The woman behind the counter, different one this time, tilted her head. "Are you moving?" "No, I'm working here. Renting." She nodded slowly, like I'd answered a different question. "Then it's correct." I didn't agree to it. A faint smile. "Not cruel. Just practiced. Most people don't. Not at first." I asked to speak to someone in charge. She pointed to a door with frosted glass. The supervisor came out, middle-aged, clean collar, tired eyes, and listened with the same patient expression you'd use on a child insisting the sky was green. "We don't remove names," he said. "It rotates. I'm not from here." He looked at me for a beat too long. "You are while you're here." I left angry, and anger usually makes me thorough. That afternoon, I walked in again and waited until the lobby cleared. I went to the board, found my name, and peeled the strip of paper off like I was removing a price tag. It came away easily. Too easily. The next morning, it was back, rewritten, same spelling, but thicker, like someone had pressed the marker harder. The date beside it didn't change. After that, the town began to teach me how this worked. Not with threats, with friction. The hardware store that had been cheerful and quick started misplacing my order until I mentioned, casually, that I'd be around Saturday. The coffee shop forgot my drink twice in 1 week, then remembered it perfectly when the barista asked, "You all set for your shift?" And I nodded without thinking. Even the job site shifted. Guys who'd been joking with me stopped lingering near my work. They kept conversations short, eyes sliding away as if they didn't want to be seen talking to me too long. And as the circled date approached, something else happened. Something you only notice if you're already tense enough to pay attention. The town went quiet. Not empty. Quiet in a coordinated way. Curtains drawn in late afternoon. Garage doors shut. Kids called inside. Cars lined neatly in driveways like they'd been parked by instruction. People moved with purpose, carrying sandbags, checking generators, adding extra locks. Like storm prep, but the forecast was clear. The sky that week was nothing but high blue and thin clouds that looked like chalk. On Thursday, I overheard 2 women in the library whispering near the returns desk. "Who is it this time?" one asked. "New one," the other said. "Staying on Maple." "Good," the first replied, and it wasn't malice. It was relief. We've had enough of our own. By Friday night I understood the shape of it, even if I didn't understand the reason. That list wasn't a sign-up sheet. It was a valve. Someone had to be outside at a certain time, somewhere specific, and the town needed it to be someone the town could afford to lose. And if they were placing that burden on outsiders, it meant locals had learned. the hard way not to volunteer. Not really. I stood in my rental kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum, and I did the kind of adult math you do when your stomach is telling you something your brain doesn't want to admit. If I showed up, I became part of their system. If I refused, I became the problem their system was designed to solve. So I made a plan that felt simple and sane. Leave before the scheduled time. Pack light. Drive out early Saturday afternoon. Get a motel off the highway. Come back Sunday like nothing happened. 3 months wasn't worth whatever this was. I'd dealt with unsafe job sites, bad neighborhoods, shady clients. This wasn't any of those. This was a whole town moving like one body. Saturday came warm and bright. I loaded my trunk after lunch. Overnight bag, laptop, paperwork, the kind of things that make you feel like you still control your life. I was careful not to look like I was fleeing. I even waved at a passing neighbor, like I was going to the store. At 2:10 p.m., I got in my car and turned the key. The engine didn't crank. No struggle, no click click click. Just nothing. Dash lights came on. Battery looked fine. Radio worked. The car behaved like it was waiting for a rule I didn't know. I tried again. Same. I popped the hood, checked the terminals, the obvious stuff. Everything looked normal, no corrosion, no loose cable. I wasn't a mechanic, but I knew enough to feel unsettled by how clean the failure was. I called a rideshare. The app searched and searched, then returned a polite error like the town didn't exist on the map. I called the one taxi number I'd seen on a flyer near the grocery store. It rang 3 times, then stopped. Not voicemail, just stopped, like someone had picked up and set it down again. I walked to the bus stop by the library, thinking I'd take whatever line went to the highway. The schedule board had been updated. A taped note covered the times. Seasonal service begins June 1st. It was May 26th. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at that paper, feeling ridiculous. Feeling watched, even though the street was empty. By late afternoon the air changed. Not temperature, tone. The town's quiet returned early, like everyone was moving up their bedtime. A dog barked once, and was immediately silenced. A screen door shut somewhere with a sharp finality. At 7:12 p.m., I heard it, a single sound rolling over the houses. Not a siren exactly. More like an old bell. One long, low note that didn't belong in modern life. It carried in a way that made my skin tighten, like it wasn't meant to be heard so much as obeyed. I killed my lights. Not dramatic, just instinct. I sat on the living room floor with my phone in my hand and listened. At first there was nothing but the faint hiss of my own breathing and the soft tick of the wall clock. Then a sound at the front of the house, barely there. A light pressure against the door, like someone leaning in to feel if it would give. Then a gentle tap, not on the door itself, lower, near the frame. Tap, tap. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I watched the sliver of darkness under the door as if it might change shape. The tapping stopped. A new sound came from the side of the house, scraping, slow and careful, like something dragging a fingernail along the baseboard outside. It traveled, inch by inch, testing, listening for gaps. I've lived through storms that made houses creak. This wasn't that. This was deliberate. Every few minutes, the pressure returned at a different place. The back door, the kitchen window, the front again. Not hard enough to break anything. Just enough to let me know it was there, and it knew the boundaries. At one point, I risked a look through a gap in the curtain. The street was dark, but not because the power was out. Porch lights had been turned off on purpose. No headlights, no movement, just a neighborhood holding its breath. And on my porch chair, under the dim gray of the evening, there was something that hadn't been there earlier. A reflective vest. Bright strips, clean fabric, neatly folded like a uniform laid out for work. No footsteps in the pollen that dusted the porch boards. No smudge marks. Nothing that made sense with the fact that it had arrived. My throat went dry. I stayed behind the curtain and stared at that vest until my eyes hurt, because it felt like proof. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was appointment. The scraping continued. The tapping returned. Patient. Persistent. It went on long enough that time stopped feeling normal. My phone battery dropped. My legs cramped. The town's silence pressed in so hard I could hear my own heartbeat like it didn't belong to me. And then slowly it faded, like someone deciding they'd waited long enough. I didn't sleep. I just sat until the first gray light seeped into the living room and made the furniture look ordinary again. At 5:48 a.m., a car door shut somewhere down the street. Another, farther away. Birds began to argue in the trees like nothing had happened. The town exhaled. I went outside cautiously, expecting. Honestly, I don't know what I expected. Damage. A note. Anything. The vest was gone. My porch was clean except for the soft smear of pollen untouched. I tried my car again, mostly to prove a point to myself. It started immediately, smooth as ever. By 7:30 a.m., the coffee shop was open and cheerful. A woman I'd never met smiled at me like we shared a harmless secret. "Morning. You get everything done okay?" I didn't answer. I just took my coffee and left. Later that day, I went back to the library building because some part of me needed to see it with my own eyes. On the volunteer board, my name was crossed off with a single straight line. Not angry, not scribbled, just completed. I left town the next morning under the excuse of a supply run and never brought my bags back. The contract became a phone call, then an email, then something I paid a penalty to escape. It felt expensive at the time. What bothered me was how quickly the story tried to erase itself. When I asked carefully about the volunteer list, people gave the same soft answers. It's just how we do things. It keeps us safe. Everyone takes a turn. But when I pressed for specifics, their eyes shifted, and the conversation ended like a door gently closing. In the library archives, whole years of the local newsletter were missing. Binders jumped from one spring to another as if time had been edited. The newspaper microfilm had gaps that looked accidental until you saw how clean the missing stretches were. No torn film, no damaged labels. Just absence. A week after I got home, I reached into an old jacket pocket and pulled out a folded flyer. Community participation is community protection. It looked too new to be old. Crisp paper, sharp ink, the circled date still dark like it had been marked yesterday. I couldn't remember putting it there. I've told myself plenty of versions of what happened. Mechanical issues, small-town hazing, a collective prank that got out of hand. But none of those explanations fit the coordination. The way the town prepared like a ritual. The way everyone knew the time. The way my name appeared correctly before anyone knew me. What lingers isn't a monster in the dark. It's the shape of a community deciding, calmly and together, who counts as us and who counts as available. Sometimes, when I'm walking to my car at dusk and the street is quiet, I think about that vest, clean, folded, waiting where I couldn't pretend not to see it. I still don't know what would have happened if I'd put it on and stepped outside at 7:30, whether they would have accepted me afterward, or whether volunteer was just the polite word they used for offering.